Welcome to our lesson on percents and converting fractions to percents. One thing I want to remind you before we get started is the word percent means per hundred, because cent, like cent as in penny or cent as in century, means hundred. So make sure that you have this paper in front of you and a pencil and that you're taking the notes along with me. In the first question, it wants us to use this 10 by 10 grid, which a 10 by 10 grid, of course, has 100 squares, in order to shade in 43%. And so what we can do is 43% means 43 per 100, 43 out of 100. So I would shade in this row of 10, this row of 10, so now we're at 20, 30, 40, and that alone would be 40%, but now we need the extra 3, so 41%, 42%, 43%. So you can see it's almost half, because 43% would be almost half. Okay, next question is we're going to shade in 89%. Now again, 89% means per 89 out of 100. So we would shade this 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and then 9 more. Okay, so that would be 89 per 100, 89 out of 100, or 89%. All right, make sure that you're still writing along with me. The next set of problems that we are going to try ask us to write the percent as a fraction or a mixed number in simplest form. So when I read this first number, it says 55%. And again, percent means per 100. So I can actually write it as 55 per 100, over 100. And now I have it as a fraction, and the second direction is to write it in simplest form. So in this situation, I know that both of these are divisible by 5. And so when I do that, I can simplify this problem to 11/20. So that's my answer for number 3 is 11/20. All right, number 4. So in number 4, the problem is kind of weird. It's 140%. And so that's telling me it's over 1 whole, because 1 whole is 100%. So I'm going to go ahead and write this 140%, or 140 per 100. And from here, what I was saying is this one looks a little bit weird because it is an improper fraction. So we're going to make this into a mixed number first. So 1 and 40 out of 100. And the next thing I would want to do is reduce. And so I can actually divide both of these by 20 to get my final answer of 1 whole and 2/5. Now the reason that this makes sense is because this number was over 100, so we were expecting 1 whole and then some. Okay, next problem gets a little bit trickier because we have a decimal involved. So in this problem, we read it the same way, 12 and 5/10% or per 100. So we're going to go ahead and write that 12 and 5/10 over 100. But now I can't actually have a fraction with a decimal in it. That's not considered simplified. So I have to first get rid of the decimal. And in order to do that, I know that by multiplying by 10, it will help me move my decimal place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to multiply 12.5 or 12 and 5/10 by 10. And what that does for me, if you can't do it in your head, you can always do it off to the side. So 12.5 times 10. And what's going to wind up happening is you would get, we would put our zeros down, insert a 0 there. And we would get 125. So again, if you multiply by a multiple of 10, it bumps your decimal place over. So I've got 125 over 1,000. And now from here, I can actually simplify to simplest form. So if you're not sure what these are divisible by, you could start dividing by a smaller number like 5 or something. But these actually both happen to be divisible by 125. So 125 divided by 125 is 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. And then 1,000 divided by 125. Let's go ahead and set that up on the side. So we've got 1,000 divided by 125. 125 goes into 1,000 actually exactly 8 times, and you can kind of check that off to the side. And we wouldn't have any remaining, so we would have 1/8. So 12.5%, 12.5% is actually the same fraction as 1/8. So that's what we're doing here, is we're taking the percentage and making it into its equivalent fraction form. Okay, on to our next problem, which is 6/10 of a percent. Now, this being a decimal by itself right here, that is telling me that this is a very, very small number. It's, in fact, less than 1%. It's going to be a very small number, so we know that it's going to be a pretty small fraction as well. So we can start off with the same process we had before. So 6/10 of a percent, 6/10 per 100. And from here, again, I need to get rid of any sort of decimal within my fraction, because if there's a decimal, it's not considered simplest form. So I'm going to do what I did last time, which is multiply by 10. And if I do it to the top, I need to do it to the bottom in order to keep these equivalent. So when I multiply 6/10 times 10, I would get 6. And when I multiply 100 times 10, I get 1,000. And this looks like a good fraction, but I need to simplify still. So from here, I'm going to divide both of these numbers by 2. And I would get my final answer of 3/500. Okay? So what this is telling me, let's go back and kind of take a look at each of these. 55% written as a fraction is 55/100, but in simplest form, it's 11 out of 20. So let's say that 11 people out of 20 voted that we should have no school on Fridays. That would mean that 55% of people voted that. So these fractions and percentages match each other. Just like 140% as a fraction, it's 1 2/5. 12.5% or 12 5/10 is 1/8. And again, 6/10 of a percent is less than 1%. It's very small, so it's 3/500, 3/500.